Hey everybody, sneaking one on you today, episode 10 of the Exercise Science and Culture Show. This is Matt Hines, and today this is basically a follow-up from last week. I had a question about managing cholesterol levels in the diet, and I just I want to talk about that because I did some readings and I just want to share some of the articles that I had been reading. So it seems that prescribing a DASH diet, which is relatively low fat, moderate carbohydrates, this is common practice within the medical community. Most of the most powerful associations around cardiovascular health promote DASH. This approach has been producing results, no doubt about it, around cardiovascular health. But I'm not seeing any validation for why we can't eat whole fat animal products from quality sources. So, and it seems that given all the positive data around the DASH guideline, this can be a safe bet for cardiovascular health. However, given the body of evidence that contradicts the restrictions of saturated fat from quality sources, it seems that we can be just as healthy with a higher percentage of our intake from saturated fat. And that's an important note, percentage of intake. So you may eat less protein and carb or less unsaturated fats. And if you listen closely to the rationale for low fat, it's usually to do with calories. And yes, a relatively higher fat food will be less in volume than a relatively more protein or carb rich food for the same calories. But that's not what's important. It's about how satiated you will become from eating. And so have we considered that perhaps we will be more satiated from the higher fat foods because that's what our body needs? So let me go over some articles for you and you can be the judge. So first, what is DASH? It stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. It's an eating plan based on the research study sponsored by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. These studies showed that DASH lowers high blood pressure and improves cholesterol. This reduces your risk of getting heart disease. This diet emphasizes vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. It includes fat-free or low-fat dairy products, fish, poultry, beans, nuts, and vegetable oils. It limits foods that are high in saturated fat. These foods include fatty meats, full-fat dairy products, and tropical oils such as coconut, palm kernel, and palm oils. And I don't have anything on that, but then there's this whole other body of evidence showing how good coconut oil is for you, and that there's a particular substance in there that there's a lot of research being done on now to show the myriad of benefits that it has. And this also limits sugar sweetened beverages and sweets. Here's just another article talking about a little bit about the research itself. So between 92 and 97, researchers tested about 500 men and women, about 46 years old. They had blood pressure between 160 over 80. They tried to get a good reflection of demographic differences, especially to address the fact that African Americans tend to be more prone to high blood pressure. Participants were asked to follow one of three diets. The control diet was low in fiber and minerals like potassium, calcium, and magnesium, but it had a typical American fat and protein profile. Another experimental diet was used similar to the control diet, but it included more fruits and vegetables and fewer sweets. And then the third diet was the DASH diet. So, and again, no doubt about it, in this study, the research was really clear. But let's look at this critically for a second. And this article is just talking about some of the problems, some of the main concerns with DASH as a diet approach. And well, the first thing that they say, which is worth noting, it's worth understanding. When we're talking about, and I was saying last week how important natural foods are, how beneficial they are. But there is something to consider, and that's in preparation. Because, well, obviously you wouldn't eat raw meat. But there's also examples where you wouldn't want to. There's a lot of data to show that lignans can be deleterious for our health, and they're commonly in a lot of foods. Nightshade, potatoes, tomatoes. They're also in legumes, beans. And so if you eat these things raw, they can really mess up your guts because of the lignans. But if you cook these foods properly, you can virtually eliminate the lignin content. The lignans will break down. So you'll get all the benefits of that food without the downside. So that's worth considering. And there's other examples of how food preparation, kale is another example of something I know from personal experience. For a while, I was eating tons of raw kale and my guts got thrashed. And the reality is that because it's such a fibrous food, if you're eating too much of it, too much fiber can be disruptive as well. But if you cook it even very lightly, or actually massaging the kale, that's what the deal is with massaging the kale with some oil. It breaks down some of that fiber content, and as a result, it's unlocking the full range of nutrients that something like the kale has. If you don't do that, like if you eat collard greens are another example of that, you can't eat raw collard greens and expect to ingest all to take up all of the micronutrients. You have to cook it, and there's like a sweet spot where if you cook it a little bit, maybe you lose a little bit, but your body is 3 times more able to ingest what micronutrients are left in there. So going back to this article, she also has a problem with the low-fat dairy. And she cites a couple of articles talking about how full-fat dairy may be better for weight loss, fertility, and overall health. So I'll link you to this article, which will link you to those articles. And she also mentions that just the no mention of the huge health benefits for the organ meats, the bone broth, eating nose to tail, and the nutritional benefits of doing so. This is Freddie, by the way. He needs some attention, so. Okay, and so the next article is going to talk about how did this happen? What is this low-fat hysteria all about? Or maybe, is it hysteria? I don't know, but let me just read you this. Maybe I should read this part. So I'll give you his abstract. This article examines how faith and science led physicians and patients to embrace the low-fat diet for heart disease prevention and weight loss. Studies in the late 40s showed a correlation between high-fat diets and high cholesterol levels, suggesting that a low-fat diet might prevent heart disease in high-risk patients. More research showed the same stuff. After the 80s, the low-fat approach became an overarching ideology promoted by physicians, the federal government, the food industry and popular health media. Many Americans subscribe to the ideology of low fat, even though there was no clear evidence that it prevented heart disease or promoted weight loss. Ironically, in the same decades that the low fat approach assumed ideological status, Americans in the aggregate were getting fatter, leading to what many call the obesity epidemic, which, okay, yeah, it's worth considering for a moment or noting of our health statistics in this country. And so nevertheless, the low-fat ideology had such a hold on Americans that skeptics were dismissed. Only recently has evidence of a paradigm shift begun to surface, first with the challenge of the low-carbohydrate diet, and then with a more moderate approach reflecting recent scientific knowledge about fats. So he's going to go on to talk about other cultures and how they have been eating at the same time as us, and there's nobody else is eating low-fat dairy and only low-fat meats, just to be clear. I want to go next to, this is a Harvard article, a summary of research, and I just want to read you their bit about saturated fats. So these are common in the American diet. They're solid at room temperature. Common sources include the red meats, whole milks, cheeses. Coconut oil is also a saturated fat. So is it bad for you? A diet rich in saturated fats can drive up total cholesterol and tip the balance toward more harmful LDL cholesterol, which prompts blockages to form in arteries in the heart and elsewhere in the body. For that reason, most nutrition experts recommend limiting saturated fat to under 10% of calories a day. Okay, so there's concern. They express concern, but they also give you this 10% window, and 10% is a fair amount. So, okay, so that's not nothing. That's not like that's pretty open. Maybe this, I think that, to me, that sounds kind of fair. But they do also say a handful of recent reports have muddied the link between saturated fat and heart disease. One meta-analysis of 21 studies said that there was not enough evidence to conclude that saturated fat increases the risk of heart disease, but that replacing saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat may indeed reduce risk of heart disease. I'm going to go on to another article, and quality. Where does quality come into play? And I'm going to read you this article from a clearly biased source, but and why isn't there more of an evidence base to show this? Why hasn't there been more of an effort to understand this? I don't know, but they have some data that they are citing here, and you can take it for what it is worth, okay? But they say choosing higher welfare animal products over intensively reared animal products would be expected to be beneficial in reducing dietary intake of fat, including saturated fat. Modern Western diets are often deficient in omega-3 fatty acids and have excessive amounts of omega-6 fatty acids relative to the amount of omega-3. An adequate intake of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids is particularly important for brain and heart health. Compared with intensively farmed animal products, higher welfare animal products typically have higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids and a more favorable ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Wild salmon and trout are an example that we all know. Pasture-reared beef, lamb, chicken, these also from slow-growing layer-type strains And some free-range eggs are particularly beneficial in this respect. So yeah, we all know about the wild-caught salmon, and people think omega-3 fish. But no, every animal has omega-3. It's just that our animals are not healthy. The way that we raise them, the stuff that you can get at a regular grocery store, Foster Freeze or whatever, they don't take care of those animals. They don't feed them a good diet. So they don't have the same ratio in their body of omega-6 to omega-3. They didn't receive a balanced diet. So then their fat content will be out of balance. And then that's the problem. Okay? That's the essence of the problem as I understand it. So I don't know, man, but I look at it this way. Oh, one more thing. So then I type in saturated fat, good or bad. And the first 20 searches, literally, 11 of them say something about it being bad, and 9 of them say something about them being good. So it's hard to say, but look at it this way. Did we pick the skin off of our chicken at any point in human history before the 1960s? And do they even do that anywhere else in the world? No, they don't. They actually eat more of the animal, as was suggested, including the brains, the livers, blood, the bone broth. And that's because the whole animal offers complete nutrition. So unless there is a rebuttal for that, and please come at me, all I can hope is that the common prescription is updated to reflect the latest research, and that we shift the research in a slightly different direction. Let's look into this a little bit deeper. I'm hoping we can do that. All right, so that's enough for today. Thank you so much for listening. And let me holler at Dana, Rosina, Philip, Rachel, and Jonathan. Thank you so much for listening in. I will be back with you Monday afternoon. Have a great day.